Welcome to The Faithful Steward. This is a podcast all about sharing biblical wisdom and practical insights in order to help church leaders pursue and teach financial freedom as part of Christian discipleship. We believe this is a spiritual conversation, and this is a place where the church needs to lead the way in order to move our communities forward in how we steward God's resources. I'm your host, James Lenhoff, and I am so passionate about this conversation and helping leaders have the confidence to step into it. We believe that if we help people thrive financially and grow spiritually, it changes everything. And I am so excited to join you on this journey. This podcast is brought to you by Good Sense. If you'd like more information about what we're up to, you can go to our website at goodsensemovement.org. All right, let's get started with today's conversation. Well, today we're going to continue our discussion around the Enneagram and stewardship. We're going to move into that next group of 3 personality types in the Enneagram, and you can go back and listen to the last episode to just kind of get a sense of the Enneagram, and then also that first group of 3, the type 2, 3, and 4, and how they're motivated by shame. Today, we're going to talk about groups 5, 6, and 7, and their motivation, their core issue is fear. And they tend to be what a lot of people refer to as the thinking center or the head center. I am very familiar with this particular group because I'm a 7, and so I'm really aware of how quickly I can get in my own head and spin out in anxiety and fear. And so this group is really fascinating to explore. I find a lot of comfort in understanding myself as we go through some of this because it's all super familiar to me. And so if you are either a 5, 6, or 7, I see you. I share that sense of fear. And what we'll see in this triad is the same patterns that you see in the other ones, and that there is kind of an internalized version where we take that fear, in this case of this triad, and we move it internal. That'd be our 5. There's a mask of that fear. There's kind of a hiding of it that is the 6. And then there is the external expression, which is the 7. Just like in the 2, 3, and 4, we had the external in the 2, the masking of shame in the 3. The 3 seems really confident because they're super achiever, but they're actually masking that. And then the 4 takes it internal. And so it's a very interesting pattern that we see. And we're going to kind of dive in and start with the 5, which is actually the internal processor of fear. That's our investigator. And the 5 tends to take the fear of the world and all the chaos and all of the scary things and go inward. They withdraw. They pull away from the world. They tend to be very isolated, and they are really interested in knowing everything. Their answer to fear is to just know everything, to have all the answers, to fully understand and investigate every aspect of what they're afraid of, so that they can convince themselves they don't have to be afraid because they know enough. This is a really interesting personality type. A lot of times 5s become engineers. They're very detail-oriented. CPAs a lot of times are 5s. They want to make sure they've put all the puzzle pieces together and they understand the complexities of the stuff that they're dealing with. And so one of the things that's really fascinating about how 5s tend to operate is when they get anxious, when they experience fear, you'll see them eject. They'll pull away from social interaction. They'll pull away from the team in a work setting, for example, and they'll go dark and they'll go deep into their own chewing on whatever data or information or learning they need in order to somehow satiate and alleviate the fear that they're wrestling with. And so when you see a 5 pull away, it's an indication that they're actually afraid of something. They're having a deep sense of anxiety, and they're going to go try to learn enough to make that fear go away. And so when we relate that to stewardship, one of the things I see a lot of times with 5s is they are incredibly effective spreadsheeters. They love data. They love information. They are really quick to be able to put a puzzle together and understand all the moving parts. And so they love things like budgets. They love to organize and pay attention to and really dive into the data that's related to money. But a lot of times it's rooted in finding security. So we see a big motivation in the 5s to convince themselves that they're safe by knowing enough about all the moving parts and where every penny is being accounted for. And they get really, really detailed so that they can tell themselves they're okay. One of the things that's really difficult for the 5 is they will find their security in money. If they have enough and they know where it is and they know how it's all going to provide for them, they will lose the narrative. They'll be so convinced that their security and their safety is found in all of these spreadsheet cells and all the data related to the resources that they forget that the owner of the resources is God, that their job is to be a steward of these resources, not to own them and have them be their source and their provision. 5s can get really wrapped around the idea that this is my stuff and this stuff needs to be really well organized and really well maintained so that I can feel safe. One of the most powerful things for a 5 is to experience the freedom of stewardship because it can alleviate some of that fear in and of itself. If we can break this thought that my safety comes from having enough and knowing exactly where it is, to my safety comes from being a child of God and knowing that He cares for me, it breaks open an ability to get out of their own head and to get back out into the world. And one of the things that's fascinating about the 5 is when they move towards health, they move to an 8. And an 8 is commonly called the activist. The 8 is very much about others and helping, but they tend to be very forceful, very powerful. And one of the things that's so amazing about a really healthy 5 is they can take all of that knowledge, all of that wisdom and understanding that they've been researching and chewing on, and then they can actually turn and use it for the benefit of those around them. When they get healthy and they can break that cycle of fear, they actually become fearless advocates for the people who are in pain and who are in need around them. They're amazing. The 6, on the other hand, the 6 is a master at planning contingencies. The 6 is known as the Loyalist. And one of the things that's really fascinating about the 6 is their whole world revolves around making sure that their people are protected and safe and provided for. They see a very, very strong role in their life of providing not only care, but also resources and protection for all of their favorite people. So they're very intentional about their family and their friends. When I teach on this in person, I'll ask a bunch of the people in the room, I'll just say, who in here knows exactly where all the exit doors are in case there's a fire? And a few people will raise their hand and I'll say, those are our 6s. Right? They are contingency planners. They have a plan A, a plan B, a plan C, a plan D. They are so thoughtful in making sure that they know exactly what they're going to do no matter what happens. They have all of the different options mapped out and they're confident that they are prepared. The interesting thing about that is that's a mask to hide their fear and their anxiety. Just like the 3, the achiever, is striving after awards and recognition and seems really, really confident, but they're actually motivated by the shame they're trying to overcome. The 6, a lot of times people would not see them as an anxious person because they have contingency plans. They know exactly what to do. They've got it all figured out. They seem really comfortable and confident and fearless, but that's because they've built all these structures, all of these different paths. No matter which turn we have to take, I know exactly what next turn to take. All of that is mapped out because of their fear. They're overcoming their sense of anxiety by planning and organizing all the contingencies. One of the things that's really hard for a 6 is to get to a place of freedom from that, to actually allow for the unknown, to allow for the uncertainty and get comfortable in that without it triggering an anxiety attack. A lot of times you'll see the 6 become really effective and accomplished. They will look a lot like a 3 when they're stressed. Because when they've mapped all the contingencies out and then they act on those things, they tend to accomplish, they tend to achieve. And so a lot of times 6s and 3s will be confused with each other. They're both masking their root motivation by doing, by being prepared, by being put together. And they're hiding the fact that they're afraid in the 6's case or that they're ashamed in the 3's case. What health looks like for a 6 is to move to a place of peace. And a lot of times that's moving to the 9, by the way. The 9 is the peacemaker. And when we move in that direction as a 6, what we're really trying to do is get to a place where we're accepting that there are things that are out of our control, and we're okay with that. We're trusting that the provider of all things, that the king of the universe will care for us, will be our protection, will be our security, instead of us making all of those things happen with our own plans and our own designs. The 6 in their peaceful state is an incredibly beautiful relationship. They are amazing parents. They are wonderful friends because they can be thoughtful and intentional without being anxious and over-preparing and overworking that plan. They can allow for flexibility, allow for the unknown to happen and not let it rattle them. And so in terms of stewardship, one of the things that's really helpful for the 6 is to inject space for there to be fun and unpredictable things, to go on vacations and not have it fully mapped out and every contingency plan. If it rains today or if there's a cancellation over there, we'll have these other things. To just go and allow what happens to happen. To spend without a full and complete knowledge of exactly how we're going to use these resources while we're having fun, allowing for some of that enjoyment and delight to interfere with their mind's tendency towards planning and over-preparing, to just inject some flexibility and some fun money, some opportunities to just enjoy ourselves, and we don't know for sure what's going to happen next. That is such a gift to give to a 6 if you're in relationship with a 6, encouraging them to let go of some of that tight hold of all those different plans gives them an opportunity to experience the freedom of the unknown, the beauty of trusting in whatever God has for us. And so there's this really tough balance to strike for the 6 because they are excellent planners and that is a strength, but it can also become their identity. It can become their source of security and confidence, and we can misplace as 6s the role of the sovereign God with our own designs and structures because we know better, because we've thought of all the different contingencies and we know exactly how to do this right. 6s are amazingly loyal to their friendships, to their family, but they're mostly loyal in terms of protecting them rather than actually enjoying them and engaging with them. And so that's what unlocks when you can let go of some of that tight hold. So the 7 is called the Enthusiast. 7s run after every shiny object that they see. They are super excited about a thing for a month, and then they're tired of it, and they want something new, something different. They're always excited about what's next. One of the challenges for the 7 is that they're really avoiding the fear that they're running away from. They are medicating their pain of fear and anxiety by keeping themselves distracted and occupied. And this is me. I am fully aware of how often I am spinning in things that I'm doing in order to avoid the pain of sitting in my fear and allowing it to have its way. Anxiety is not something that's comfortable for a 7 to even feel, let alone sit still in. And so the answer for the 7 is to run from the fear into the external world. We are more afraid of what's inside of us than we are about what's outside of us. The 5, on the other hand, is very comfortable on the interior and is very afraid of the exterior. The 7 is the opposite. I'm afraid of what happens in my mind and in my heart. And so if I just keep myself preoccupied and distracted with things that are fun and exciting and new, then I won't have to deal with what's happening inside. So again, like you see that pattern in all the triads, we're going from that internal in the 5 to the masking in the 6 to the external in the 7. If I can just run enough and be busy enough, I won't actually have to feel the fear that I'm running from. The 7 is really tough to nail down when it comes to stewardship because 7s will spend very recklessly on enjoyment and hobbies and engage in all kinds of things. If they're really interested in a certain hobby, they will buy all the things that are associated with that hobby until they're not interested anymore. And then those things just sit and gather dust and they go buy a new thing. And then that thing gathers dust and they buy a new thing. We're constantly moving to what's next, which means we're spending on what we need in order to experience that next new thing. And then we're making piles of old things we don't even care about and we're not interested in anymore. 7s can be very gluttonous in their spending. They can be very frivolous and thoughtless because they're so focused on experiencing fun and joy that they aren't even paying attention a lot of times to what's really happening in their stewardship. They're not asking themselves the question, what am I running from? They're not asking themselves the question, is this even going to work? They're just grabbing at whatever is interesting and exciting. And a lot of times that involves resources in order to make the pain of their fear go away momentarily. So a 7, interestingly enough, moves to a 1 when they're stressed. They get very specific, very rigid. And so they move away from kind of the crazy, fun, exciting that they're distracting themselves with, and they will get very angry about things that aren't right. They can get, I know as a 7, I can get very specific in my detail tracking. I can get very specific in what's right and wrong. The 1, which we'll get to next time, is the reformer. The 1 is also known as the perfectionist. They tend to be very specific about how things should operate, what should happen and what shouldn't happen, what's right and wrong. And the 7 moves there very quickly in stress. The irony and the beauty of what the Enneagram teaches is that we actually, as 7s, need to move more to the 5 in order to get healthier. The 5, again, is that internal processor of fear. The 5 is the one that goes inward, isolates, deals with, and wrestles with their fear in loneliness and solitude. Loneliness and solitude are the 7's kryptonite. That's what we're most afraid of. We want to get away from that as fast as possible. And what is so fun about the way the Enneagram works is it says actually what you need most is to slow down and process this. Sit in it. Allow it to have its way. Do the work of the 5 of learning about yourself, learning about what you're afraid of, learning about what's stirring in you, and ask good questions of yourself. Ask good questions of the Lord. What does this look like? What does this mean? Why is this bothering me so much? 7s won't even sit still enough to ask that question because they're just continually busying themselves to avoid the answer to that question. And so one of the things that's really tough for 7s in relationship is to slow down enough and to be intentional enough about hard conversations, about engaging in difficult decisions, because it spins up their fear and they just want to run away. And so creating space, if you're in a couple with a 7, creating space on a regular basis to engage in just check-in conversations. What's going on? How are we doing? What are we facing? What are we afraid of? What are we excited about? Let's talk about those things regularly so that there's not as much fear associated with that conversation and we don't have to then run away from it. The other thing is putting some specific limitations on the 7's tendency to spend on themselves, on fun, on excitement, on new hobbies, new experiences, deciding ahead of time what of that you will do, what can you do, what's reasonable without putting yourselves in danger because of the 7 overspending on their own excitement and energy towards new things. We want to be able to decide ahead of time together what we're picking up and also face what we need to put down in order to make that happen. A lot of times the 7 won't sit still long enough to actually do that work. And so when we think about this fear center, one of the things that I think is most important for the fear center is understanding what you're afraid of and recognizing you actually don't have control over those things. The answers that each of these types tend to employ in order to make their fear go away, they actually don't work. For the 5, we're afraid of the world, so we're going to avoid it and isolate and learn everything we can. But that actually doesn't take the unknown and the uncertain out of the equation. The same for the 6. No matter how much we plan and double plan and triple plan for how all these things are going to go, we don't actually know what's going to happen. We are not sovereign. God is. And so, and the 7, this fear of being still and being in solitude and facing what's actually happening inside of us is so uncomfortable. But the answer to all of those things is Jesus, walking with Jesus in this beautiful experience of apprenticing under him, right? Being curious and knowing that there are things we'll never have the answers to. In the 7's case, being still, seeking out solitude intentionally. When we seek those things out, we open ourselves up to the fact that what we are afraid of is stuff that really points back to an ownership mindset. It points back to the fact that this is mine and I need to protect it, instead of this is God's and he gets to decide what to do with it. It points back to the sense that I want to medicate my fear by spending and getting to do whatever I want in order to self-indulge and make myself feel good. And that is not God's design. He gave us these resources to manage for a purpose, and our job is to ask him, what would you have me do with your stuff, with your resources? And that includes everything. That's not just our finances. That's also our time, our family relationships. What do you want me to do with these things that are yours that you have asked me to steward? When we ask that question honestly and wait for God to answer it, the fear starts to dissipate because we realize We're not in control. He is, and we can trust him. And we soften some of those fear motivators, and we step more confidently into faithful stewardship. Well, thank you so much for listening to the Faithful Steward podcast. Be sure to check out the show notes for links and other information that we mentioned in today's episode. Also, be sure to check out our website at goodsensemovement.org to get all the resources we offer churches to help equip them in teaching financial stewardship to their community. If you have any questions or any topics you want to make sure we cover on our show, you can email me at jameslenhoff@goodsensemovement.org. I'd love to hear from you.